Hello, I'm taping this and just wanted to share on my YouTube channel just some more thoughts that I have. My channel is just a hodgepodge, a lot of Christian stuff, a lot of Christian teachings, my preaching from the past, thoughts about different things. Today I'm going to share with you my thoughts about World War II, and I'm always playing the what if game. What if Nixon had won the election of 1960 in the United States? Give it a thought of there would have been no Kennedy assassination, probably no Vietnam War, probably no Watergate. With those three events not occurring, we'd have a completely different world today. And you just wonder what it would be like. The what if game. My what if that I want to talk about is sort of looking at, it's not really a what if, but what if Hitler had done things differently? What could he have done different that would have given him a victory in World War II? So what could Hitler have done for Germany to win that war? Now, first of all, we have to sort of assume, you have to be with me on this, that winning the war, the part of the war where he invades the Soviet Union, if Germany could have conquered the Soviet Union, he would have won the whole war. So how could he have defeated the Soviet Union? And then if he, by doing that, it would have been relatively easy for him to have taken anything else he wanted after that. So let's look at how could Hitler have conquered the Soviet Union. Okay, number one, this is not in any order of importance, it's just how I thought about it. Number one, if Hitler had not helped Mussolini. Mussolini was constantly causing problems for Hitler, and Hitler had to change some of his plans. He had to send Rommel and the Afrika Korps into North Africa. He had to delay his invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 to rescue Mussolini in Greece and that sort of thing. If he would have just told Mussolini stay out of it, or Mussolini gets in some trouble, he says, you're on your own, kid, I'm not here to help you. I've got my own agenda, I'm going to do my own thing. And if he had not helped Mussolini, that would have been a big help. Number two, and this is pretty radical, if Hitler had not attacked the West, if he had not gone into Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, gone into France, if he had just maintained a little force, enough to prevent an invasion, just a few divisions along the Western Front, along the border of France, and just focused on the Soviet Union. If he had not invaded, then what would have happened? First of all, if he had not invaded the West, he wouldn't have conquered France. He wouldn't have sent the British Empire into turmoil. Churchill probably would never have become prime minister, and Churchill was his big thorn. Churchill was the one, like a bulldog, he was not going to let go until Hitler was defeated. If Churchill could have stayed out of the war, Hitler would not have that problem. And he would have stayed out of the war if Hitler had not invaded France. So that's just a thought on that. Of course, along those lines, he would have avoided the Battle of Britain. Now, even if he'd conquered France, if he had not gone into the Battle of Britain, if he had not fought the Battle of Britain, then all those planes and all those airmen, all those crews would have been available to go against the Soviet Union. Now, I'm thinking that's a package deal. He doesn't invade France. He doesn't engage in the Battle of Britain. So all that military might that was spent doing that would have been turned loose on the Soviet Union. Here's something, when I wrote my book, Strategic Spiritual Warfare, I did some research on the Battle of Britain. And I discovered that the Nazis lost more planes and more crew in the Battle of Britain than they had for the entirety of Operation Barbarossa. In other words, every plane that flew over Russia, you take that, whatever the number is, you take the number of planes that flew over the Soviet Union and the number of planes that Hitler lost in the Battle of Britain, the bigger number is the Battle of Britain. Imagine over double what the aircraft he had and the crews more importantly, the crews, I think, because he lost all his experienced pilots in the Battle of Britain. But if he would have had all that air power to go into the Soviet Union, not to mention the bombs and the bullets and all the other things that the planes were carrying, might have made a difference. I think that would have made a big difference. Now another thing, if the Nazis could have built more U-boats and fewer battleships, that would have improved his Navy, because it wasn't going to be a battleship war. The U-boat war was going to protect him and that sort of thing. This is an iffy part here, because if he built more U-boats, he used the U-boats mostly against the British. So if he had not built the U-boats, or if he had not gone into the Battle of the Atlantic, he might have stood a better chance of winning the war by keeping Britain appeased. But who's what we have here? That's just the thought, though. If he built more U-boats and not battleships, he could have done better in the Battle of the Atlantic, which he really wanted to avoid if possible. Now another way the Nazis could have won and conquered the Soviet Union is if he had a true partnership with Japan. I believe later one of the topics I'm giving here, one of the items, is Hitler should never have declared war against the United States. If he just said, okay, the United States is fighting Japan, that's their war, we're staying out of that, then the United States would not have conquered, would not have invaded Europe. They wouldn't have put all their massive production of armaments and materials. They wouldn't have sent that to Europe. That would have been focused in the Pacific. And again, it would not have been used against Hitler, it would have been used against the Japanese. But I digress. If Japan, I believe the reason Hitler declared war on the United States, he didn't have a true partnership with Japan, and he thought, hey, I'll declare war on the United States, Japan then will join me and invade the Soviet Union. If Japan had invaded the Soviet Union in force from the Pacific, then all those units that were in Siberia would not have come over to Europe. They would have stayed to fight the Japanese. So anyway, that's a thought there. He should have had a true partnership. Now another thing he could have done is, instead of invading France or Britain with the Battle of Britain, if he had used some internal confusion, create internal confusion, use the propaganda war. It's what communists and socialists are doing in 2020 to the world. They're invading the United States, invading the British Empire. They're using the media to say, hey, socialism's a good thing, and destroying the way of life that the West has enjoyed and prospered with. Now, if Hitler had done something like that in France, Great Britain, the United States, hey, National Socialism is not a bad thing. Hitler's a good guy. He wants to rid the world of communists. I mean, the Soviet Union, it was the evil empire back then. A lot of people in the United States were saying, hey, Hitler's invaded the Soviet Union. Hey, that's a good thing. They can conquer our enemies for us. Go to it, Hitler. If he had done a little more propaganda and a little less shooting in the West, he could have turned some hearts and minds, which would have helped him in the war against the Soviet Union. Also, another major thing that he did wrong, when the armies invaded the Soviet Union, and when they went into areas of the Ukraine, into Belarus, into Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they were welcomed as liberators, even in the Soviet Union itself. I'm reading a book on Gorbachev. Gorbachev was about 10 years old when, 10, 11, 12 years old when the Soviet Union was invaded. Within 2 days, his father was gone, every man in his village was gone, the women had to do everything, and they were miserable. And plus, he talked about the things that Stalin was doing that was really, the people didn't like Stalin. To give you an example, this is during the war. Women had to do all the work because the men were gone. They were gone into the army. And some women, of course, the Russian weather was terrible, the mud, you've seen the pictures, the videos of the German soldiers, the tanks and everything trying to get through the trucks, couldn't get through the mud. Well, the mud was the same for everybody. And so these women had horse-drawn carts, and they were trying to carry stuff around, and they couldn't get through the road. So some women in Gorbachev's village went into the field, and they pulled out hay and they put it in the street, or in the road, not the street, it was out in the country, but they put it out, the hay out in the road, so they could draw, the horses could carry the carts to get into town, carry stuff to market, whatever it is they mean to travel. And these women were arrested, put in jail, because the hay they took was from government-owned fields. And he says, hey, what's going on here? Our own government is against us. When the Nazis were going across initially into the Soviet Union, they were welcomed as liberators. Yay, we finally got somebody to set us free from the tyrant Stalin. But instead, Hitler sends his goons, he sends his secret police, the political groups, they round up people and they start killing them. Well, we don't want you, we just want to wipe you out. They go into villages, kill everybody in the village. Hey, these guys aren't liberators, they're tormentors. They're worse than Stalin is. So the underground came up instead of the underground, excuse me, instead of the underground going against Stalin and the Soviet soldiers and the Soviet system, they then are going against the Nazis. That's a big point. If Hitler, even if he had pretended, I'm your friend, I'm here to liberate you, then those people would have joined him and been a mightier army to push even further east across the Soviet Union. Now, the other thing I mentioned was not to declare war on the United States. The United States' main contribution to World War II was not General Patton, was not General Eisenhower, it was the production. We sent thousands and thousands of trucks to the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease. We had more bombs and bullets and planes and tanks and ships, and I mean, we were a production machine. In the United States during World War II, there were no automobiles produced for civilian consumption. It was all those industries were war machines. And the United States, if he had not declared war on the United States would not have declared war on Hitler. We would have focused, the United States would have focused on Japan and the Pacific, and Hitler would have been set free to continue on into the Soviet Union. That would have been an even more massive army attacking onto the Soviet Union. Now that I've said all that about how Hitler might have defeated the Soviet Union, let me go back and show you how even if all that had happened, it wouldn't have worked. Hitler had no chance to ever defeat the Soviet Union. Number one, the Soviet Union was just too big. I went all the way to Stalingrad on a tour a few years back. I got to Stalingrad and Hitler was worn out. He said, if I can get to the Volga River and conquer this city, Stalingrad, I'll declare victory. He had no plans to continue on across the river. Well, guess what? If I had not gone to Stalingrad as the farthest point that the Nazis got, and it's as far as they got was Stalingrad. But if he had conquered Stalingrad, then there would be tourist places today, even further east. They would have gone there to say, this is as far as the Nazis got. The Soviet Union is just too big and cannot be conquered. The other thing was, under the dictator, the people in the Soviet Union could not revolt to say, we want peace with Hitler. Stalin was perfectly willing to send millions and millions of his people into the meat grinder to stop Hitler. He would have stopped it, he would have destroyed his own country in order to destroy Hitler. And so this was a fight to the death. It was just more, the Nazis could not have overcome the brutal dictator policies of the Soviet Union. Now, number three, and this is very interesting. Another reason the Nazis could not have defeated the Soviet Union is that, and this sounds funny, but hear me out, the Nazis were always on the defensive. Now let me explain that. When the Nazis invaded Poland, and also when they invaded France, they moved in with their blitzkrieg, they surrounded an army, and then that army said, oh, we quit, stop, and then they would consolidate their gain and quickly move on, surround another army, and the whole thing happened. When they invaded the Soviet Union, they used blitzkrieg tactics, they surrounded an army, and the word came down, you don't quit. And therefore, the Soviet forces that were surrounded began to break out. They would fight the Germans to break out, and the Germans were on the defensive because now the Soviets were fighting them, and they would defeat them. The Nazis would win, but then they would move on to the next place, surround them, and then they'd be on the defensive again because the Russians didn't quit. The other thing is the lieutenants, the captains, the sergeants were all getting killed. The Germans, by the end of the first year of the Barbarossa, I don't know the exact statistics, but the leadership in the field, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the company commanders, some of the battalion commanders, they were gone. And so they had to get people into those positions, and they were not properly trained to be leaders. So the leadership that the Nazis had from 1942 and 1943, their best leaders were gone. I'm talking about the leaders in the field, on the ground, facing the troops, face to face. Those guys were being eliminated because of the Soviet tactics of constantly, we're not giving up, we're going to fight. And so they're constantly fighting. Yes, they lost those battles. The first year, they got as close as looking right into Moscow. But they didn't have the leadership to really move on and go forward after that. And also, another thing that would have gone on, Japan would have been a little help. Japan's army was not really built to be a battlefield army the way the Soviets were, the way the Nazis were in their blitzkrieg, the way Patton operated. The Japanese were in the Pacific where they mostly fought on islands. They fought jungle warfare. They were not, battalions and divisions and armies marching across the field like they would have been if they'd gone into Siberia. They really weren't equipped to do that kind of battle. They were equipped for jungle warfare. They were equipped for smaller units to move in, take a city, and then terrorize that city. The other reason it may not have worked is, who knows what could have happened. The United Kingdom may have eventually attacked, because remember when Hitler invaded Poland, France, and the United Kingdom did declare war, they may have, with Nazis moving into Russia, may have said, okay, we're going to go ahead and invade. We're going to attack. We're going to use our air force to bomb Berlin and bomb the factories in Germany. That could have happened, and that would have hurted Hitler as well. But it's always interesting to think about what could have happened in World War II, all the ways Hitler could have had a stronger army to go against the Soviet Union, but the bottom line is the Soviet Union is just too big. I think even if he had taken Moscow, Stalin was already in the process of moving his armies back, not his armies, he was moving his factories back so they would have continued war production. He would send millions and billions of people into the meat grinder of the Nazis, and eventually he would have wore them down and come back and defeated them. So I think Hitler's cause was a lost cause, and therefore there was no way he could have ever won the Second World War. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting. Make some comments. If you disagree, that's fine. I'm always interested in learning more. There may be some things that I don't know yet, and you can teach me. I'm glad to do it. And let's look at history as the interesting story that it is, and see what we can do. It's a very interesting topic to look at, discuss, and learn about. Thank you. Have a good day, my friends.